All right, now let's get started. So our agenda for today is first, we're just going to go into what Git and GitHub actually mean. And I'm just going to introduce you what each of those are. They both sound like the same thing, but they're not. And then we're going to go into GitHub terms and Git commands. So again, those two are different things. We're going to look right into it. We're going to look into some files that you can use on GitHub. And we're going to be finishing off the tutorial, but I'm going to be doing a tutorial in the midst of all of it as well, just to kind of show you everything that we talk about. And I hope that you all have everything installed from our first email that we sent. So I hope you have access to like VS Code or any code editor which you can enter Git commands to. I hope you've made a GitHub account and have Git installed. Obviously, you don't need to have that. You can just watch along and do it later on your own time. But just doing it together with me will make it a lot more easier to understand. All right, so what is Git and what is GitHub? So Git is known as a free and open source version control system. It's used for tracking changes during software development. So it's basically just, you could almost think of it as a coding language, which is used to track changes and updates in a software project as it is being built. And to do that, like an easier way to do that is using GitHub. So GitHub is a web platform or like an online platform, just like Instagram, Facebook. It's an online platform that provides hosting and collaboration services for Git repositories and projects. So it's a way for you to share your projects, to work on projects with other people. Just like when you're working in a larger team, it's easier to have one place to store your project and have people make changes to it. Yeah, no worries there. That's definitely fine. So GitHub is basically just used to kind of host your projects. And we'll go into what each of those terms mean. Some of those terms might be a little confusing. We'll go into that deeper. But GitHub is basically just an online website where you can put your projects in and you can add multiple collaborators. So a whole team could be working on the same project at the same time. And you can finish the project without any conflicts, without any problems. So it just makes it a lot easier to work on something together. So terms for GitHub. So repository, which is something that we talked about before, GitHub hosts repositories. And what does a repository mean? It's basically just a code project or the folder / place where your project is kept and named on GitHub. And we'll look into that in just a second. And the second thing here mentioned is commit or a commit message. So each time that you're working on your local machine, so GitHub is something that's hosted online, but when you're working on your project, you're going to be working on your local machine, on your computer or your laptop, right? So whenever you make a change on your laptop, on your computer to that code, you're going to save it and you're going to have to tell GitHub that you changed this and to update it on GitHub as well. So that's kind of what happens with commit messages. You can, every time you save, you can make a commit or a commit message. And that commit message is meant to be something meaningful, which will reflect kind of what you changed so that someone else who's working on your team or even yourself, you know what you changed. And if you ever need to go back to revert that change or, make edits to that specific thing, you know where it is and where to find it and like how far, if it's even worth changing. Like maybe you made a commit and then you made 17 commits after and you want to make a slight change. It's probably not worth it to go back all the way. Maybe you can try to figure out to make that change with whatever you have now currently instead of having to revert back. But it's easier to have that so you can kind of also track your progress and kind of know what you've done and what's left to do. So I'm going to switch gears right now and move on to GitHub. So if you guys have created GitHub accounts, you can sign in, follow along with me. So this is my GitHub page, kind of exposing myself right now, but that's okay. So this is how your GitHub page would look like. This is kind of the home base page, really. And here I have repositories, which is the most important thing that we're going to be looking at today. So I'm just going to go in, open my repositories. And I have all my repositories here, which are all my projects that I've worked on in the past really long time. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new repository. So if you're following along, you can either see this kind of plus icon, which you can use to create it, or you can, if you're in the repositories tab, you can just click on this green new button. Either way should work. So let's create a new repository. And this is my username on GitHub, and we're going to call the repository, let's say demo ghost. Demo ghost name is available, which is perfect. You can add a description, which is kind of just for you or anyone else who's viewing your project to see what this project is about. So we can just say, this is a demo repository for ghost. All right. Good enough, simple, pretty easy. And yeah, I want to emphasize on the fact that your description needs to be pretty simple, like maybe 3 to 4 lines at most. If you want to add more details, there's another file called README, which we're also going to talk about in a minute. But your description should be pretty simple, like not longer than 4 lines, I would say. Next, we have a public or a private option to choose. So we can make our repository public for anybody to see, or private, which in the sense that you'd have to give access for people to see. Usually when you're doing class assignments, and if your professor is grading them through GitHub Classroom, they're going to ask you to make it private so that other people don't see your code and copy your code, especially if they're using the same assignments from like previous years. They're going to ask those students to keep it private so people don't have access to that code. When you're building a project just for like resume purposes, or just as a solo project for your own betterment, you can make it public and you can talk about it, show it to other people. So we're going to create a README, but we're not going to create one right now. We'll just go ahead and click create repository. And this is kind of what happens when we create it. Right now it's empty, so we don't really have anything in it. What we're going to do now is we're going to create a new file. So it says get started by creating a new file or uploading. You could upload files, but there's an easier way to do that, which we'll go through as well. We recommend every repository, including a README. So I'm going to go back to my presentation very quickly. Oops. We'll just quickly go through these first. So pull request is another option that you have in GitHub. We're going to talk about branches. So branches allow different people to work on different different kind of parts of the code. You have a main branch, and then you have different branches that you can pull the main branch off. Basically, you make a pull request when your part of the branch is done. So basically, when your part of the project is done and you want to merge it with the main, like you want to say that you're done and you want to add this change to your main project file, you make a pull request to the owner, or like some lead person who's going to review that code. And once they approve that, it gets added to the main project file for everybody to see. So the main thing is what is the default branch in all of the repositories, and that's what everybody sees as a first glance. They can view other branches as well if they want to, but the main branch is what they first see. So it's like the main homepage of your project. And once you're done, once your part of it is done, you can make a pull request to the owner to view it, to make sure that it's not causing any other conflicts, to make sure that it's working perfectly with the main code that already exists, and then accept it, merge it to the main file, and then your work is viewed. And there's one last thing called forking a repository. So forking a repository is pretty simple, even though it sounds complicated. The first time I read it, I was really weirded out by what that means, but it's really just creating a copy of a project. So sometimes you'll see like people have like books on GitHub, or like lead code questions on GitHub with their solvings. So those projects are pretty, like, it's not really a project, it's more so just like a file, but those repositories are in demand, like people want access to those, so they'll fork it, which what forking does is creates a copy of that repository and puts it in your profile. So you kind of have access to that project, but it's a copy. So if you make any changes to it, it's not really going to be reflected on the main, or like on the actual repository of the person. It's just, you're just going to have access to it and you can do whatever you want with it, access it whenever you need to. All right, so README file, which is where we left off. So each GitHub repository has or is recommended to have a README file. And this file is of type Markdown, which makes it easy to edit on the GitHub platform. This file is basically a document that provides a description. So it's more of a very detailed description containing essential information about a software project, repository, or directory. It's included in the root directory of the project's repository. So just like the main folder of the repository. And the purpose of this is to convey important details about the project to anyone who visits or interacts with the repository. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to go back and we're going to create a README file. So we're going to name it readme.md. So .md is just a markdown type file, which allows you to kind of edit it or format it while you're creating it. So the hash kind of just gives us a header name. We're going to say description. And then we can just add some things here to say this is a test file. Right. And then we'll commit changes. So what it does, your main repository is now created. So your project is now created on your GitHub. Every time you make a change, even if it's adding a new file, even if the thing is empty and you're creating a new file, that's a change. So it's going to ask you to commit changes. And this is kind of a default commit message, which is fine. If you want to add a description, you can. You don't need to though. So we can just commit those changes. And you'll see, oops, why did that happen? Oh, okay, no, that was created. So you can see our commit message appears here, and we have one commit so far. Our commit message appears here where it says create readme, which is on the file that we changed or that we created. So whichever file you change, the latest commit message is going to appear next to it. And this is kind of where our readme file appears. So you can add more details to this depending on what your project is. And it will just add on to here. And this is where our description went. So there's not a lot of space for the description, as you can see, but you can add to the readme file however many details you want to. So that's that. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to clone this in VS Code. So I'm just going to create a new folder on my laptop where I want to keep a copy of this project or clone this project so I can make changes to it from my laptop instead of making them online again and again. So I'm just going to do demo. So now I have a folder. I'm going to go to VS Code and open a new window. Never mind all this previous work. Okay. So now I have a new window. If you've already followed the steps of linking your GitHub to your VS Code, this process should be pretty simple. Otherwise, you would have to use terminal to clone the repository, and for that you need to create an SSH key, which is kind of out of scope for the video right now. We're gonna go into too much detail with that. So I'm assuming and I'm hoping that you have connected your GitHub to your VS Code, because that gives us an option here, clone Git repository, which makes it super easy. And we get an option here, clone from GitHub. So it has access to all my GitHub repositories. And you can see the latest one that I just made is demo ghostem. So it's going to give me that option right at the top. And I'm going to click on it. And it's going to ask me for a folder where I want to keep that cloned copy of my project. So I'm going to use the folder that I just created. And it's going to clone that in right here. And once it's cloned, We can open it. And I have the copy here. So right now, the only thing my repository has is the README file, which is fine. What I'm gonna do now is, I guess I trust the authors. Let's switch gears again and go back to our presentation for a little bit. Okay. If there's any questions, please let me know. I hope I'm not going too fast. Okay, this looks good. All right, so Git commands. So these are basically commands for Git, or like code basically, to let Git know that you want to make changes to your project, post it on GitHub, because Git most popularly works with GitHub. So when you're using Git, it kind of connects to GitHub and you're able to communicate from your computer to GitHub using Git. So the first thing that we have here is clone, which we already used. So we could either use the clone option on VS Code or use git clone. The only reason that we'd need a key now, initially it would work without a key, but now there's like some more authentication problems, so you need a key for it. But otherwise, you can use the terminal command as well to clone using the link of your repository. So clone just means bring a repository hosted on GitHub or elsewhere into a folder on your local machine. The add command, and we're going to use all these commands in a little bit, but the git add command just means that you're going to be tracking your changes, any changes that you've made, or you can name a specific file to track the specific changes to that file. Track your changes in Git to your online hosted Git repository. So since we've cloned the repository in our VS Code, it kind of is connected to GitHub that way. And whatever changes, whenever we commit or save them, it's obviously going to be directly hosted there. Next, commit, save your files or changes in Git, which is also something that we've seen. You can add a commit message to make it more meaningful to know what you've exactly done in that change. And every time you make a change, when you save, you have to commit your changes. And then push and pull are two commands. So after you're done committing your changes, after you've saved your work, to make it appear to GitHub, you need to push them as like when you're on your local machine, you need to push them to GitHub for GitHub to see them, or for them to appear on your GitHub repository. Same thing with pull. Like if someone else has made a change from their computer and pushed it to your GitHub repository, and you want that change to appear in your like local folder in your VS Code, you need to pull those changes. So this way you're able to make changes and bring changes from the remote GitHub repository, and whoever makes changes, they're able to see those changes. I think, yeah, let's go back to our VS Code. So we're gonna open terminal, create a new terminal. I'm just gonna close these. And I'm gonna create a new file, and I'm just gonna call it addition.python. Let's just make a very simple Python file. And we'll make like a super simple method. It's just like an addition method. Okay. So now that I made this change, I'm gonna go to my Git, my terminal, and I hope everybody can see this. And I'm gonna say Git. So each of your Git commands starts with Git. I'm gonna say Git add. Oh, we're gonna add all files, so we're gonna do Git add period. So now we can, I probably should have shown you this earlier, but actually, let me redo this. I'll create another file called subtraction. And we'll create another method. Oops. So A, B, and we'll just do Just very simple. Okay, so right now you can see next to our subtraction kind of file, you see this U. And what that U means is untracked. I hope you can see, I can't move my cursor to it, but it says at the end untracked. So that means that Git isn't really tracking this right now because we haven't committed it or we haven't added for it to be tracked through GitHub, right? So once I make that comment again and I say git add period, it's gonna track all files. So now it's added and it's tracking this file. So it's tracking all the changes being made to it. And then I can check the command to git status. So here it kind of tells us what the status with our project and our changes right now is. So it tells us that our branch is up to date with the main branch. And we're gonna look into branches just in a little bit. And the changes to be committed. So right now it's just tracked those changes. It hasn't committed them. And it sees the new files that we've made, which are addition and subtraction py. So let's go ahead and make a commit message. So git commit -m allows you to write a message, and then you put your message in double quotation marks. And we can say adding addition and subtraction files. So now our commit has been made, and it's acknowledged that the changes that we've made are creation of these two files. So once we've made that commit, we can now push it to GitHub. So once we make the commit, it just like adds those changes, but to actually make it appear on GitHub, we need to push our changes. So we can just do git push. And that'll take a minute, but once done, it's good. This is kind of just the specifics of what it's doing. We don't need to dive into that detail, but we can see this is kind of the important bit. It's made those changes to main. Now let's go back to our repository and see kind of where that happened. So we can just say refresh. And we can see those two files appeared. And we have the commits as well a minute ago. So great, that works. Now let's go into branching. So this is kind of where you can see your branches. Right now we only have one branch, which is the main branch. Actually, I'll have this little bit of I'll show this diagram first. So what a branch really is exactly what it means. So you have a main branch. Oops, okay. So you have a main branch where all of your work is kind of stored, your entire project, the main homepage of your project really is. And let's say someone wants to work on a specific task. So if on commit 3, like until this point, you have your project, and at this point, someone makes a branch, what's going to happen, what they're going to get is everything up until that point is going to be cloned into that branch. So if they had, let's say, 3 files up until commit 3, those 3 files, exactly as they are going to be copied into that branch. And then they can work on that branch, make changes. But once they're done with those changes, they need to create a pull request for those changes to be added to the main branch. So they're going to be pushing their changes to the second branch. But if they want those changes to be added to the main branch, they need to make a pull request. And that request needs to be reviewed and added. So let's go ahead and try that. So you can create a branch through GitHub from here. Let's create a branch called GoSum. If I hit enter, it is going to create a new branch called GoStem, and we're in that branch right now. And it says this branch is up to date with main, which means everything that is in main is in this branch right now. And if I go back to my VS Code, so right now in this little left corner, it shows me that I only have the main branch, right? So that's because this hasn't been updated. So to update my local kind of folder with all the branches, I can either, so git pull will only pull changes in that current branch. If I want all the other branch, I need to say git fetch -- all. and that will pull all branches. So it kind of tells me what it's gotten, like which branches. There's a new branch called GoStem, origin GoStem. And if I want to change to that branch from, because right now I'm still in main, I'm still working in the main branch. If I want to change to be working in that branch, I can just do git check out the name of the branch. So GoStem. And it'll tell us that we've switched up to a new branch called GoStem, and it's set up to track. So Git is tracking that branch as well, just perfect. If we want to create a new branch here, we can do git branch. Let's say, so this creates a new branch, but that branch is still just in our kind of space. So let's do git check out. So we're switching to that branch, right? And then we're going to, let's just make a small change in this branch. Like I'll add in the subtraction, a comment, making a small change. All right. So now we need to first commit our changes. Commit adding a branch. So that's our commit message. Working tree clean. Okay, wait, I think if we git push, it should be added. Oh, actually, I think I can't do that because I'm the only person here. Could you repeat how you, so I think it's easier right now for you guys to add a branch through the online GitHub thing. So if you, let's say we go to main, and you kind of see this little icon here, like this icon that says main, you can just click on it, and create a new branch. So I could create a new branch called GitHub, and then this, it kind of gives me the option to create a new branch. I can click on it and it'll create this new branch for me. Okay, so I did add a GitHub branch. I'm not sure why it's not showing yet. Oh, I think it's because it's the name GitHub. I probably shouldn't have done that. That's my bad, guys. You can't name a branch on GitHub. So it's given it like a hash name, really. But that's okay. Okay, yep. So that is good. Let's go back to our VS Code, and we'll just switch to our GoStem branch. Okay, now we're in GoStem. I think now if we make, let's actually create a new file, and I'll just create like a text file, whatever. And we'll just add, so this is right now untracked, and I'm going to open a new terminal so that I don't get confused with the previous commands. And same thing, I think we're getting pretty good at this. Oh, actually we should add it first because this file was created new and it hasn't been added. So let's do that. Check our git status. So we can see that this file has now been added, and we can make our commit now. Commit m, adding text file, and enter. So it made that commit. Now we can push. It's gonna take a minute and it's gonna do that for us. So it added that to GoStem, right? So once we go back here, we shouldn't see that change in the main branch because we did it in GoStem. So it tells us go stem, had recent pushes less than a minute ago. So if I go in our main file, we don't even see the text file, right? So we're gonna have to go to go stem. Oh, see, it's here. So we're gonna go to go stem, and we see that we have the text file. We can open it. Adding text file. I'm not sure why it didn't add the. Did we add something to it? I think now we can. Maybe if we. Commit, adding to text file. And then do git push. Is everything up to date? Maybe I need to refresh. Essentially, it should show what you have in your file. Um, hmm. So the README works. Okay, technically it should be showing what you have. I'm not sure why it's doing that right now, but it should show. I think my Wi-Fi isn't too great and it's not updating. Like it's taking time to update, which is why we also saw that branch a lot later. But essentially it should show. And we can see here it says GoStem had recent pushes 2 minutes ago. So if we go back to GoStem, it'll also tell us that this branch is one commit ahead of main because we have a text file, which the main does not have. So kind of I think the last thing for today's session, maybe, I'm not sure. But so we talked about pull requests. So if you've worked, so let's say this was my branch and I'm done working on it. I've made the changes. So let's just say I had to create this text file. That was my part. I did that. And now I'm ready to have this be added to the main branch, the home like base of our project. I can go to pull requests and create a new pull request. And I can, so I'm gonna choose the branch which I want to be pulled to main or really merged to main. So let's say it's GoStem. And it will show me like the changes that I made, like what's different in it. And I'm gonna create the pull request. So you can also see here that it kind of says that it's able to merge automatically. You don't always want to choose that option because sometimes you never know, like it could be risky, like it could be putting it in places where you don't want it to add that code. So you always want to make a pull request and have the person or the owner of the repository or whoever the lead is in the project team review it first and then merge it. So you can leave a comment. You can say, did my part of adding the text file and making comments, etc., whatever. Once you're done, you can add like a reviewer. Since I'm the only person here, I can't really add myself, but when you're making a project, you probably have like a couple people in the repository as a collaborator. So you can choose one of those persons to add here, who you're going to be sending the request to for them to review the code. And you're going to be assigning yourself because you're the one who's creating this pull request. So you're going to make yourself as the assignee. Once you're done that, you're going to create the pull request and then they're going to get this notification. They can view it. GitHub kind of gives you like an automatic view of what's happening to your project once this, or where you want to add it, what's going to happen if you merge it. And once they view that and they're okay with it, they can accept it and merge your branch to main. I can't really add any reviewers because I'm the only person here, but That's really the main concept of a pull request. So we will go back to our presentation. I think this is kind of the last slide. Just quickly explain how GitHub works. What's the workflow? So pretty simple, as you've already seen. You write code in your files, you make changes, and you make a pull request if you're working in a different branch. If you're working in the same branch, which is not recommended, by the way, if you're working on a project with multiple people, it's 100% not recommended to work on the same branch because that's going to create a lot of conflicts that you will not be able to fix later. I made that mistake with my course assignment and we had to do it all over again. So don't do that. Always, even if you're just 2 people, make different branches for everything that you do. Okay. And then we're going to talk about, so local Git workflow means what's happening on your computer, on your laptop. GitHub workflow is what's happening online on GitHub, on your repository. So you're writing code, you're stating changes, which we did through git add. We're committing changes, which we did through git commit. Git commit will just add no comments, like no messages, and commit those changes. But if you want to add a message, which is always recommended, you can do the -m and add your message in the quotation marks. And then you do git push, you post your changes to GitHub. If you want them to be added to the main branch or to any specific branch, you make a pull request and choose the branch which you want to be added to main. So that's kind of the workflow. I hope that made sense. If there's any questions, please let me know. I know GitHub seems pretty scary. I was very scared of learning it first, but it's not that bad, you guys. Seeing that we have no questions, I think we're doing pretty well for time, actually. If we have no questions, I think we can go to the very end. All right, so thank you everybody for joining this workshop. Excuse the noise in the background. But thank you so much for attending. I hope you learned something, and because you guys are here on a Saturday morning, not early morning, but still Saturday, I have a small gift for you. Is there a question? Yeah, of course, no problem. I have a small gift for you guys, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. 1 second. My gift is taking a minute to okay. So it's a little gift for being here. And especially because I know the steps that I kind of sent earlier were kind of could have taken a while to do, but if you would like, I have created this little document for you. So what you can do is, if you haven't been able to follow along so far, you can kind of just take all these git commands and work with them on your own time, play with them, create a project on GitHub, you know, test it out, test out these commands. Some of these commands, I think some of them have like new things that we haven't covered, but are pretty simple. Like I think this git ignore is just creating like a git ignore file. Like let's say if you have a project and you have a lot of images in it, but you don't want those images to show on GitHub, but still be stored in your local computer, you can do a git ignore and you can have the git ignore file contain images. So those images will not be tracked and they will not show on your repository, but they'll still be there in your local files for everybody that has them. Yeah, I think everything else was pretty much covered, but this is it. And I think I'm going to try to add the link in the chat. I'm not sure if this will work.
I was going to suggest if you have this on Google Drive, you know, maybe you can share the link, and when we upload this to YouTube, so we can share to people. I know some people would like to go over this session again, and they can go back at their own time and, you know, follow up everything that you just said. And if we add this to the description of the video on YouTube, then they can actually download this. Is that okay? Does
Yep.
that work? Yeah?
Yep,
Okay.
for sure. That
Yay.
sounds good. So yeah,
Awesome.
you have this document to kind of go over things if you want to. We'll be posting this recording as well. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, you guys. Really appreciate it. File does not exist. What does that mean? The file exists. Does not exist.
Oh, it's
Hmm.
working. It says it's working.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's
I was
fine.
like, what? Does not exist. Okay. All right.
All right.